Greetings and welcome. Thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell, for the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the journey of Mars through the sign of Virgo, which begins on the 10th of July. Now Mars is very much to do with passion and initiation through its rulership of Aries, but to do with transformation and deep connections and passion through its rulership of Scorpio. So what can we expect in the practical earth sign of Virgo? That's what I'm going to be sharing with you. It goes on for 7 weeks, but as the event begins, so stern Saturn is opposing Mars, and this is going to be a very significant influence. So I'm going to give you the timings of when that becomes exact. But obviously Mars is about energy and drive, and Saturn can be about resistance. So it's not necessarily going to go exactly as people might expect. But towards the end of July and the start of August, we have a sensational link between Jupiter and Mars, and then Uranus and Mars. So much to share with you. But also then I will go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect in terms of your sun or your ascendant. If you're new here, this is very much a community. It's lovely to have you with us. If you have any thoughts, please do share them. I try to interact with all of them. If, however, you've yet to subscribe, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you're a returning visitor, thank you for joining me once more. Now, I'd just like to share with you a unique opportunity. Year 2023 is rattling by, it seems to me, and 24 is racing towards us. If you order your year 2024 personal horoscope forecast based on your unique birth data now, I will prepare for you the rest of year 2023 free. Also, in my special package, you'll get 30% off and your character analysis, your life roadmap report. This gives you searing insights into the patterns that have dominated in your life so far and will help you to get a more intimate understanding of them. So Mars into Virgo, it begins at 11:40 a.m. on the 10th of July in terms of Universal Central Time. It goes on through to the 27th of August, so 7 weeks. Now ordinarily Mars takes around about 6 weeks to shuttle through each sign, so that's a bit different. What can we expect of Mars in Virgo? Well, remember Virgo is a mutable sign, so it can be flexing, but Mars seeks the limelight. It's very much about our ego. And the sign of Virgo can be very much more to do with sacrifice and being of service to others. But I don't mean servile. So Mars encourages us to find ways that we can assist and support, or perhaps get a little bit more conscious about our welfare, because the sign of Virgo is about our physical health and it's also about virtue. So whether it is that we eat a little bit too much chocolate, calorific goodies, perhaps a little bit too sedentary in our life approach, Mars is asking us to get stuck in and be a little bit more dynamic. Now, it is true that Mars is a little more cautious about its expenditure of energy in the sign of Virgo, but it wants to achieve tangible outcomes. So that's very much in keeping with an earth sign. And it can also be precise and exacting. If you think of a doctor who specialises in surgery, it's very likely they will have Mars in Virgo, or at least Mars in the 6th house, because of the ability to really concentrate on minute details, but then obviously carry out the procedure with a great deal of accuracy and care. There also can be an analytical approach, a methodical way of dealing with situations. However, because we do have Saturn opposite Mars as this event begins, it's a little bit wide to begin with, but it does tighten up. There could be a potential at times for us to get a little bit low in vitality, because the Saturnian energies in our emotional sector of our chart, based on the solar chart, the 12th house, and Mars in Virgo is making us impatient to make progress. So things are not necessarily going to go quite as quickly or quite as organizedly as we might hope. Now on the screen now, I'm sharing the natal event chart in terms of the solar situation. So the big takeout from this is that Mars forges a brilliant link with the North Node. Now the North Node is right at the end of its journey in the sign of Taurus. You can see it's only 48 minutes in Taurus. It's going to be moving, the true North Node moves on the 17th of July into Aries for the first time in 17 years. But you can see in house 6 is Mars, and in house 2 is the node. So that's a really very constructive influence, and can urge us in a way to try to find collaboration and cooperation and help one another. So that's lovely. But you can also see there is Saturn in house 12 at 6 degrees in that opposition with Mars. So that's the one that's really going to provide friction and slow things down. So as much as Mars may give us the appetite to get stuck in and be very productive, Virgo, efficient Virgo, Saturn is providing the handbrake. So I think maybe we need to take into account how we feel, our emotional world, the spiritual dimension. So as much as Mars may ask us to cut through and concentrate on the detail, I feel that Saturn's asking us to ask the question about what frame of mind we're in, and just measuring our output to suit the available energy that we have. Now I'm sharing on the screen now the natal chart in terms of Placidus based on Greenwich and Universal Central Time. So the ascendant is at 9 degrees and 16 minutes in Libra. Saturn's in house 5, joy and pleasures, self-expression, hard with Saturn. And Mars is in house 11, very much the collective, friendship, interaction with others. And it is still conjunct Venus, it's just a disassociate conjunction. So that is still giving us the potential to have fun, but Saturn is a much more censorious angle. So even if we want to be playful through the event chart Placidus, Saturn is still being like the stern parent or the stern teacher. Now in terms of the aspects that are going to be generated over the next 7 weeks, there's 3 major ones. The first we start with, which is Mars opposite Saturn, and that goes on within 3 degrees until the 26th of July, and it's exact on the 20th. So in the last phase of July, I actually feel that physical vitality may not be at a premium. So needing to balance the emotional, psychological and spiritual dimension of where Saturn is with the physical output and desire to get things done, Mars, impatience, action, in the precise Virgo, I really feel from now until the end of July we're going to have to work at it. So we need to eke out our energy wisely. But as July comes to a close, then Mars starts to forge a terrific angle to Jupiter. So from the 26th of July through to the 8th of August, but exact on the 1st of August is the trine. Now this is one of the most fortunate of all planetary aspects, because it gives us a lot of innate confidence, and whereas Saturn restricts and limits, Jupiter pushes us to go, not worry too much, just go with the flow and be very dynamic. So Mars trine Jupiter, Jupiter in Taurus, Earth sign, Mars in Virgo, Earth sign. So perhaps through the limitation that we're going to experience with Saturn providing the handbrake to Mars, although it may slow us down, it may also give us more time to prepare for when we really want to propel ourselves forwards. And believe me, from the end of July through to the 8th of August, that can see a big speeding up. And hopefully it will see some kind of better news coming through as far as the economy is concerned. Then Mars forges a trine 120 degrees, very enabling, from the 10th to the 27th of August, which becomes exact on the 16th. Now, of course, Uranus is very much a radical, sometimes confrontational and sometimes disruptive influence, especially in Taurus, where of course it's in its full. But Mars trining Uranus gives us even more encouragement to be more experimental and go for things and basically rely on our instincts. And one of the things I would say about Mars's rulership of Aries, it is very much about instinct. People often accuse Aries people of just diving into situations in a reckless way without thinking through the potential consequences and then losing interest because it no longer is proven to be particularly gripping. Well, get this, nothing in the world happens without Aries or Mars energy, because it's the start point, it's the ignition point, and that is why it is so important. So when you put Mars in a trine with Uranus, it's a real radical but positively radical influence, because it encourages us to be more spontaneous but also more experimental. Now obviously Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus slows both down, which is a good thing in the case of Jupiter. It frustrates Uranus, but I feel that these latter two influences are actually going to see us gain a reward with the persistence that Mars in Virgo asked us to show. It asks us to stay with the program. It may not be very sexy to begin with. Find ways to assist other people. Find ways to tighten up. Even if it's here and there, little changes can actually add up to something quite significant, whether it is about our diet or nutrition, the amount of exercise we get, balancing our work and life demands the best we can. So we could feel slowed down, frustrated and irritable for a certain amount of the rest of this month, but particularly on the 20th of July. But August does provide some salvation and some wonderful opportunities to use that attention to detail, that desire to help others or to help ourselves, but in a very practical way, which gives us tangible outcomes. Please stay with me for your in-depth forecast from Aries through to Pisces. So Aries, having your ruler in house 6, is asking you to prioritise. If you are someone who tends to get a little bit scattered, and to be honest, with having Mars more recently in Leo along with Venus, your social situation has probably been ignited, and perhaps there are some more practical strands in your situation that have drifted a little bit. So this is a reminder to catch up on the dreaded ironing or washing or hoovering or any do-it-yourself task that's been put off or neglected. Or if Venus and Mars together in Leo and thence Mercury have been encouraging you to be more creative, and your job is proving to be a bit unstimulating and dull, I think Mars moving into this area is going to give you a big shot of encouragement to try to find a role that would give you more satisfaction, because the 6th house in Virgo really does get a bad rap, but we need to feel that there is some benefit to us as well as what we give to others. If we're just going through the process in order to get the money at the end of the week, then that becomes very disincentivizing. So I feel that Mars, because it is about passion, just because it's asking you to apply it in quite a focused way, that doesn't mean to say you can't still be passionate. So any of those strands can be what prove to be quite inspirational for you over the next 7 weeks, but particularly through August, I feel that you're really having a wonderful opportunity to actually enrich yourself, not just in terms of your sense of satisfaction and fulfillment, but also your financial situation could start to look a lot better then. But in the interim, there could be moments when you do feel a little bit lower in vitality, a bit frustrated, and try to not put too much pressure on yourself. So Taurus, the wonderful thing about Mars moving into the sign of Virgo is this is going to trigger a greater sense of appreciation of what makes you absolutely gorgeous. You don't need a greater appreciation of what makes you gorgeous. You obviously have a very strong Mars position in your natal chart. But seriously, Taurus, you're a very sensual, earthy sign. And Uranus has been a choppy influence to you in recent years. Jupiter may have brought in some reinforcement to your morale of late, but you have had Saturn in your sector of friendship and sociability, and there may have been some disappointments there of late. So Mars moving into this area is asking you to focus your passions on what you find very stimulating as an individual, because the fifth house is essentially very Leonian. It's where you need to shine. Your charisma needs to find an outlet. So over the next 7 weeks, particularly if you're wanting to engage with a hobby that you haven't had much time to spend on, or your love or social situations have been a bit caught up with some more emotional or home-based strands with your ruler in the fourth house along until as this event begins, Mars. Now you can really start to think more about having some fun. But what about Saturn? Well, it is true that Mars opposite Saturn suggests that if you are in a love relationship which isn't working very well, it could be a tense period through to the end of July. But your situation can change very quickly, particularly when Mars forges such a sensational link with Jupiter, exact on the 1st of August, and then onwards with Uranus. Because what both those events are asking you to do is be more daring as an individual. That's not to say that you can't and haven't been or won't be daring, but it's just a reassurance from me to embrace your special qualities. So Mars in Virgo is a fantastic opportunity for you, and you can let the Saturnian influence erode that opportunity, or you can be accepting that maybe some people are not meant for the longer term in your situation, whether it's friendships, whether it's interests, whether it's a community group or a network. But now's the time for you to showcase what makes you absolutely gorge. So Gemini, the recent combination of Venus and Mars in the sign of Leo has certainly given your natural ability to communicate extra luster and passion, but the arrival of Mars in your fourth house switches the desire side of your nature more towards your immediate environment. Now Mercury is going to replace Mars the day after Mars moves in Leo, so there's still going to be plenty of conversation, communication going on, especially with the people who are in or a part of your everyday world. But Mars moving into the fourth house is an interesting one, because in technical astrology, this is rather like having Mars in Cancer, and Mars in Cancer is in its fall, so it's not its best location. Mars, of course, is a rugged influence, and it can be a bit impatient. So if we put it in the fourth house, we can increase the potential for being a little more sensitive about what people say to us, perhaps even to the point of taking things personally. And because it is going to be opposed by strict Saturn right through to the 26th of July and exactly on the 20th, if, for example, you're working in an environment where they expect a lot, and that seems to be most places these days, so there's a lot of critique, a lot of expectation, a lot of schedules to keep to, and there's not much observation of how that feels, that is something that could be quite triggering to you over these next weeks. But the other thing that Mars can do in a very constructive way is give you a greater sense of urgency to resolve any kind of issue where you're not completely content with where you're living. Now, this could be an environmental issue as much as the actual home that you're in. But say, for example, it's by a busy road, it's a little bit too small, it's too far away from amenities, you feel a little bit isolated, or it suits you that you would rather be isolated. So whatever is compelling to you, Mars is going to give you a push to try to make some changes around where you live. But if you are in a family situation where your emotional voice doesn't always get heard, or perhaps as you see it, rarely heard, the chances are you could be more outspoken over this next 7 weeks. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. And also, because Mercury's sweeping into Leo to replace Mars, and you still have the svelte energies of Venus in your 3rd house, you can have a mixture of the drive, Mars in Virgo, and the velvet glove, Venus in Leo, in terms of how you actually articulate any frustrations you may have. So something could change around where you live, but equally you could feel more sensitive about where you work simply because of the role of Saturn. But let's move forwards and we get beyond the end of this month, and you have Jupiter and Uranus in your 12th house, which are going to be angling to Mars in a very constructive way. Some good fortune can come to you, Gemini, from past good deeds, your nobility, your thoughtfulness. If you've been someone who's looked out for people who are less fortunate, they could look out for you. So some kind of reward, legacy, kind message, lovely gift can come back to you as this month comes to a close and August evolves. But also, you may get some rather unexpected and dramatic insights into how you can change your home situation, or perhaps an opportunity will come up that needs to be taken very swiftly, because when Mars and Uranus are angling positively together, it's rarely something that we have much time to ponder because of the drama that both these create. Mars with the thrust, Uranus with the electric energy. So I feel as you go into August, and really from the 10th, something very, very exciting could develop. So maybe a property opportunity that you're not expecting at the moment, or you can't see at the moment, could manifest itself for you. So Cancer, how will Mars in your 3rd house play out for you? Well, you have a reputation of preferring to avoid outright conflict. You'll go left, you'll go right, you'll retreat. It's only under extreme provocation where you race forwards and deliver a mighty nip with your pincers. But over the next 8 weeks, you may find yourself much more in the mood to stand up your point of view, which is the 3rd house, and also your belief systems. But Mars, of course, is an impatient influence. You could find yourself, therefore, more outspoken. But if you are thinking about getting yourself a new mode of transport, I probably would wait until the end of July and into August, because then the glorious link between Mars and Jupiter would be the perfect time to travel somewhere, perhaps with some friends, go off on some kind of collective where you share an interest. That could be really exciting, and you can have lots of bubbly conversations, and you may be leading the way. If your environmental credentials are very strong, August could even see you getting an e-bike or an electric car with Uranus in the mix. But before then, I think there could be quite a lot of frustration if you feel that your voice is not heard, and particularly over a financial issue and with someone quite close to you. So be aware that Mars in your sign is in full, so it's not its best location. In the sign of Virgo, where it can be very precise and very thrust in, your desire to protect how you feel about things will be sharpened up for sure. But because of Saturn being across the other side of the heavens, someone else may see something in a very contrasting way to you and push back, which could create some abrasion, a clash. So I feel just be aware that you can be more outspoken, more impatient, but also a little bit frustrated, particularly if there's any kind of delay to a piece of information, a meeting, a contractual situation, or if someone's not engaging with you in the way that you would like. All that can build up quite a lot of tension. But I think going into August, the picture looks really much brighter for the way that you can interact with others and also be very persuasive about sharing your point of view. So Leo, the recent combination of Venus and Mars in your sign has given you a gorgeous, unique opportunity to amplify all that's special and individual about you. Whether it's the way you dress, whether it's the way that you relate to people, the warmth that you give to others, your generosity, your creative talents, whatever it is that has been really at the fore of your situation. The transition of Mars into Virgo gives you a chance to take whatever it is that's been exciting you and to format it into something more tangible. So for example, if you have been really excited about a business or creative plan, project or strand, the next 7 weeks can really see you take it forwards in a more serious way in terms of how you output that. Now, it may not be totally straightforward because of the grinding opposition of Saturn to Mars, which goes on, as you know, through to the 26th within 3 degrees and is exact on the 20th of July. And if your financial situation is a little bit challenging, and of course for many people there has been such a big uptick in the cost of living, then your sense of frustration about that, especially if you don't feel you have the tools to take forwards that project or plan that's so important to you, could really be quite tangible. But I think one of the things that Saturn's going to do in a way is urge you not to rush to the next phase, because the planning stage is always the stage that's very exciting. The hard bit is always getting something into a workable blend that will stand the test of time. So whatever you go through over July, even if you don't get the rewards as quickly as you would like, actually it's testing out the validity of your idea or plan to see if it really is something you have the will or the desire, or is even right karmically for you to continue with. So see the challenge in a way as a bit of an honour. And if you come through that, then the outcome at the end of this month and as you go into August could be really significant. And it's possible that if you are wanting to better your situation and the status quo isn't working for you financially, and it's not necessarily to do with your individual creativity, it's more to do with your job or how paid or not paid you are, I feel that Jupiter and Uranus are going to give you a lot of extra spark, endeavour and also creativity to really bring something to life in a very hopeful way as you go into August. So if you start off this period feeling that things are just tightening up and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, stay with it, because Virgo energy is very much about method. It's going through the processes in a very detailed way. Whilst that can be as dull as ditch water for a very larger than life sign like yours, keep going with it, because your application, and remember you're a fixed sign, so when you really apply yourself to something, that's often when you get the best results. And August can see something manifested that's much bigger and better than perhaps you can possibly imagine. So Virgo, the great news for you is having had Mars in your 12th house for the previous 6 weeks, that's not an easy thing to go through, because Mars in the 12th house has a tendency to rake up things that we thought we dealt with. The 12th house can be the subconscious, it can be, in traditional astrology, hidden enemies. It can be where we're frustrated but we feel we can't outlet that frustration, so we keep it to ourselves, bottle it up. So it's not great for our emotional or psychological health. So Mars moving into your sign is brilliant. So it brings you into the present, but you still have Venus in the 12th house, and of course your ruler Mercury is replacing Mars, and that means that the 12th house energy is still quite active. So if there is a situation in your life that's to do with some worries or anxieties, particularly around relationships, what Mars in to your sign can do is give you more assertion and more self-confidence to go for what's right for you. But because Saturn's in opposition, and of course that peaks on the 20th of July, it may be that you're needing to deal with someone who sees it in very starkly different terms to you. So I feel that your physical vitality can improve, you can feel more dynamic. That's going to be very welcome, but I don't think this is going to be a panacea in quite the way it could be if we didn't have the matter of Saturn across your chart in your 7th house of relating, and also where we have to deal with people who may be our opponents or our rivals or competitors in a bit more of an obvious way. So if there is a plan or a project that you're really excited about, you may just have to accept that things won't go quite at the speed of light that you would prefer. However, once we get into August, lots of things can open up, because what Uranus and Jupiter are pushing you to do is actually liberate yourself from something that isn't working. Even if you found it hard to actually express it, verbalize it, say out loud exactly how you feel, they are pushing you to be more daring. It's just if it's anything to do with your contact with someone else, whether it's a line manager who's awkward, a business partner, a friend, a relative, or in a romantic context, if you're dealing with someone who sees things very differently to you, the next few weeks immediately may not be particularly easy and could be quite wearing. But then into August, things brighten and lighten quite considerably for you. So Libra, if you've tuned into me over the years, you'll know that the journey of Pluto through your 4th solar house, whether you're a sun or ascendant, has been quite the test, quite the trial. But of course you have grown and evolved and learnt to set your boundaries more firmly, which has been brilliant. However, you are a people pleaser, and that part of you that likes to receive good responses, harmonizing interactions with others, is really hard coded into your being. So it's hard to completely let go of that. So whoever it is that may seem cool or detached or unfriendly, it's probably noticed by you, even if it's not going to affect you quite as much as it used to have done. It's probably noticed by you more than most people. So Mars moving into the 12th house is something that does require a little bit of care, because the 12th house is what we can't see, it's hidden. So in traditional astrology, hidden enemies. So the people who don't articulate their opposition, but they actually have not got our backs. Now Mars can be about anger, and of course the 12th house can be about our own psychology. Do you have deep-rooted angers relating to some of the traumas that you may have gone through with the transition of Pluto through Capricorn, or does it go back even further in your life history? I think for most of us, this life is not like what we're told it's going to be when we're children, or used to be told what it was going to be like. It's not a walk in the proverbial park. So because of your need to keep things on an equilibrium, it's possible that at different points in your life you may have just put to one side some frustration or anger or disappointment, because keeping the peace has actually suited your agenda at that given time. Maybe you didn't quite have the wherewithal inside, or the circumstances didn't allow it. Maybe you're in a really difficult situation where someone was not behaving in a good way at all, whether it's psychological or physical, or just in terms of neglect. Because the 12th house is our subconscious, it is the part of ourselves that our shadow side, the part that we can't see. So Mars moving into this area for 7 weeks is going to be a test. And because it goes opposite Saturn, which is in the part of your situation asking you to be very sacrificing, but also very aware that your physical vitality is perhaps not at its best, I think through July particularly, do pace yourself. You can be someone who does bend over backwards to help others, particularly with Neptune in the sign of Pisces since 2012. So don't give away your goodwill too easily through to the end of July, but also be conscious that any emotional and psychological hurts that are still washing around deep within your emotional DNA could be triggered by Mars. So you could start to have some, your mood could be a little bit up and down. You could feel a bit out of sorts. You could have some unpleasant dreams. That's all possible with Mars in the 12th house. Or you can feel that someone's not being very pleasant, but they're not saying it out right to you, which would be easier to deal with. So just prepare yourself for that. If you've done a lot of deep work in terms of personal development, you may actually go through this next few weeks absolutely fine. And what Mars could do is see you doing a lot of research and prepping things ready for when the Sun moves into your sign on the autumnal equinox, but also when Mars moves into your sign on the 27th of August, which in itself will be really exciting. So it's not all bad necessarily, but just be aware that your moods can be up and down, and at times you may feel that your temper is close to the surface, or conversely you could feel quite tearful. However, once we get into August, it's possible that some stuff that you've been planning or researching can suddenly come back to you, and because of Jupiter and Uranus being in the part of your situation to do with transitions but also long-term finance, something can start to speed up and develop which absolutely delights you. So Scorpio, Mars is of course your traditional ruler, so you have a real appreciation of its characteristics and value. It's moved into your sector of longer term planning, but also friendship. But because you've had Venus and Mars in your 10th house of work and business interests, I feel that you've been elevating some part of who you are, trying to perhaps reach a wider audience if you work for yourself, looking at ways in which you can improve your career situation. So what Mars is essentially saying to you over the next 7 weeks is, because Mars in the 11th house is a bit more democratic, it's not so much like it's Aries energy, it's more collegiate, it's able to work as an individual with other people. So that suits you pretty well because you're very much your own person. But what about that opposition with Saturn? Well, if you want different things to a partner in terms of your longer term life plan, that conversation is going to get more tense over the rest of July. If you're single and there's someone that you're attracted to in your friendship group, that could be something that you would pursue, but obviously if it didn't work out, that could have ramifications for the group as a whole and some other friendships. Then again, perhaps it's more to do with your own desire to link up with others, because you can be quite a reserved person, or wary perhaps would be the right expression. When you're with people that you're comfortable with, you can be very direct and erudite, but when you're not so sure, you can find yourself not quite flowing, and there is the potential for that with Saturn checking Mars over the next few weeks, and that could cause a little bit of frustration. But just know for sure that as you burst into August, my word, you are going to be on absolutely splendid form, and there could be someone who's going to come into your world, or a group of people, or an interest which is going to evolve, which really brings excitement, passion, fun, and a lot more to you. So Sagittarius, Mars makes its way into your 10th solar house, the midheaven. This is where we connect to the wider world. It can be to do with our goals and ambitions in a professional context, but it can also be where we want to manifest our desires in terms of how we can help and protect others. So for example, if you've got grandchildren, you may have the desire to spend more time with them. And also because Mars is going to be replaced in Leo by Mercury, and Venus is there too, that part of your nature that likes to be a free spirit may be challenged a little bit by Mars pushing you to direct your your energy and vitality towards more traditional parts of life, you know, such as work. And because Saturn's in the more emotional sector, even if you go for a big goal or ambition, if you're a caregiver or you have young children, or perhaps your own vitality is not quite as strong as you would like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can leverage things forward. And part of it could be because of that ninth house energy could at the moment be making you a little keener to explore, to travel, and not have so much responsibility. So the way that Mars works for you could be an incoming energy where someone makes demands upon you in terms of work, or someone who's authoritative in your family, when at a time you may want to just go and do your own thing. So the energy of astrology can be manifested from within us, out, which we draw down from the heavens, or it can be inward traffic that other people pick that energy up, and suddenly they're expecting us to do a lot more. So for example, in a family situation, you may have other people who are not prepared to give quite as much as you, and that could be quite tricky at the moment with that ninth house energy. So what do we take from all of this? Well, I think if you are someone who does want to go for it in terms of your talents, if you're prepared to be flexible and you don't mind traveling or relocating, this can be a time of big breakthroughs. But through getting something, attaining something, you may have to sacrifice something else. Saturn in the fourth house, not spend so much time enjoying yourself. Venus and Mercury in the ninth house. So everything has a consequence, but if you're very clear about what you want to achieve, and it is more to do with money, status, a newer job, then certainly August can be a time when you really could have, with Jupiter, your ruler, in the mix, some kind of major breakthrough, but it could happen very, very quickly, and you may need to be really on your toes in order to capitalize. So Capricorn, Mars moving into Virgo, has some interesting threads for you. Not least, Mars is a planet which is exalted in your sign, so you have a real appreciation of how business-like and hustle-bustle it can be in a really positive way. The ninth house shares your earth tropicity, so if you're trying something different, which the ninth house can be very much about, that experimental side of your nature or your curiosity could push you to do some traveling. It may see you checking out some higher education. It may be that you're going to be drawn to someone romantically who's a bit of an action-orientated type of person, someone who's quite sporty. If they're not sporty, someone who's quite bright, has lots of knowledge, bit of an intellectual, depends on your unique situation. What Venus and Mars have been stirring up in your eighth house is desire. And so if you're in a situation which has gone stale and is rather tepid, doesn't really bring you any excitement, what Mars moving into the ninth house is pushing you to do something dramatic, adventurous, independent. What's not to like? Well, it's your darn ruler, Saturn, Capricorn, because that's imposing quite the resistance to Mars's more thrusting, impulsive vibe. It's desire for spontaneity in the ninth house. But you know, that is what makes you so special, because you have the ability to balance the side of your nature that may want to do something off the cuff with that groundedness where you just can take a moment or a few days to think things through, to ensure that whatever you do try that's a bit more daring is actually going to be good for you. But I just wouldn't let your pragmatism pulverize your passion. And right through to the 27th of August, if you can engender some new, fresh and more more exciting possibilities in your situation, go for it. So it could even be your inner voice, Saturn, the third house, your inner ideas, your programming could stop you from trying something that's different and fresh, because your programming says, no, I should stick with what I know. This is what I learned very third house. Could be conversations that you're going to have. The ninth third house suggests that you can feel really quite in the need to ventilate some of your desire for a more varied and stimulating life. And it could be that someone close to you, like a sibling or a neighbour or a friend, says, well, why do you want to do that? That's not such a great idea. Don't let anyone do that to you either, because if you can overcome some of your own inner resistance, or your circumstances don't quite allow you to jet off somewhere quite exotic just like that, believe me, if you really want it, you can do it, but the chances are you're going to do it from the start of August rather than so much in July. So Aquarius, having Venus and Mars in Leo, has been quite the combination. You have the charm and the diplomacy and the harmonizing desire of Venus, and the thrust and the assertion and the boundary setting of Mars. So a great balance between them. But what about Mars making way into the 8th house to be replaced by Mercury? Well, Mercury brings in that part of your nature that's very good at communicating and listening and not necessarily being put off because someone sees things differently from you. That's one of your great gifts. But Mars moving into the 8th house is a very scorpionic influence, unlike its rulership of Aries, which is more impulsive. The 8th house is about transitions, but it's also about deep desires. So perhaps Venus has been creating a sweet point between you and someone else, and that might be very nice. But is it going to evolve, which is what the 8th house is? Is it going to grow and become something that is more gripping within the very core of your being? That's one of the questions that could be asked. Another thing that could come up through to the 27th of August is if you forged a nice relationship with someone, not necessarily romantically, are you now about to get to know them in a more psychological way? A business relationship, for example, it could be the time that you decide to wield together in some kind of firm bond and then really commit yourself and invest yourself, the 8th house, in something that can see you becoming better off. So that's another possible outcome. What about if you're in a relationship where it's okay, you're perfectly pleasant with one another, but you know, there is no spark? If the spark is what you're craving, Mars is going to make you more aware of what you're not getting over the next 7 weeks. So there's just a few different scenarios, but of course, energy can come in from outside. Someone could start showing an interest in you who's got an intensity about them, maybe magnetic eyes. Maybe they're going to lock onto you. You might find it a bit intimidating, a bit unsettling, but actually also really exciting. And then there is the more practical dimension of the 8th house, and it is about longer term finance. So we're talking about mortgages, taxation, insurances, pensions, legacies, all that kind of long down the track stuff. But if you're wanting to develop your business and you've been talking to potential investors or partners or perhaps providers of finance in terms of banking institutions, you're going to find out over the next 3 or 4 weeks whether the relationship between you actually can gain traction, because your traditional ruler Saturn is going to be blocking Mars. So whatever you want, I don't necessarily think it's going to pan out how you might exactly hope. And it could go slower and it could be very, very frustrating. So for example, if you're waiting to achieve a drawdown on some finance, or you're waiting to complete on a mortgage, or you're waiting to get the news on a potential pay rise through your work, it all may seem to drag on at an interminable speed, which can be very, very hard to bear. However, with Venus and then Mercury in your 7th house, keep the lines of communication and diplomacy going. That's going to be much better for you. But if you are wanting to do anything around a property matter, it really can all fall into place really from the very end of July and the start of August. So Pisces, Mars moving into your 7th house. It's a really interesting transition because the 7th house is where we interact with others in a positive way. It's where we can create accord, find points of harmony, celebrate the things we have in common rather than what makes us different. But for you, who can be a very giving sign, and with Venus and next Mercury in your 6th house, which can be to do with sacrifice, I think what Mars is basically saying is it's good actually to firm up where you will say yes and not necessarily see it as only where you are going to acquiesce other people's wishes. So the incoming could be that somebody demands more from you. What you'll need to give to them is, well, I've done this and that's enough. So there could be some tussles in store, particularly throughout July, as Saturn in your sign opposes Mars. And also you may find just all relationship issues really draining if there is any kind of politics or someone doesn't really readily acknowledge or appreciate or listen to where you're coming from. I think Mars in a opposition with Saturn can just make the whole thing seem very much a drudgery. However, as we get to the end of the month and we burst into August, wow, what a marvellous skyscape greets your sign in particular, because with Jupiter and Uranus in your 3rd house of everyday conversation, technology, text messages and emails, the combination between Mars and those two influences is really going to be fantastic. So what I would say is if a relationship comes to an end in July, you know, whether it's a friendship, whether it's someone you have rubbed along well with at work and it's not the same and you want to sort of draw away a little bit, Mars will help you to do that. But it won't necessarily be a particularly nice experience. When are endings pleasant? Rarely, but sometimes we have to do that in order to preserve and protect our own interests. And I think if that does come to pass this month, where you feel that enough is enough, stand in your power. Don't be tempted to give way if someone tries to start getting around you. If their past behaviour or approach has given you plenty of evidence that they say all the right things and then constantly go back on it, I think Mars is asking you to be truly assertive on those boundaries. But if you are in a profession where you do need to be quite competitive, like sales, or you're in a sporting environment, or you need to sort of come up against your rivals in quite an open way, well, you know, the stage is set for you to show what you can do over the next few weeks. But even so, some of those tussles could be a bit wearing to begin with. But August looks very bright indeed, and that could see someone new and sparkling and much more vibrant and appropriate to you entering your situation as we go into August.